Here and joining us on the guest line now, the host of True American Heroes on 102.1 FM SuperTalk Southwest, Mr. Jack Rutland. Jack, long time no speak. How you doing, sir?
Doing great, Dave. A pleasure to be on the line with you.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. Of course, today it marks the 1 week countdown to Memorial Day, and I know that's an important day for you and a lot of the folks that you've interviewed over the years on True American Heroes. And before we go any further, in your own words, tell us what True American Heroes is.
Well, it's really an incredible story, Dave. In 2003, Brookhaven and a group of veterans in the Brookhaven and Lincoln County area got together and decided, hey, we need to have some type of little museum or something so we can honor the men and women of our area that wore the uniform. And so that took place in about 2003. And about 2013, we decided to have an anniversary of a special 10 years that the museum had grown and survived. And I went to Robert Byrd, the manager of the SuperTalk station here in Brookhaven. I said, Robert, what if we interviewed, say, half a dozen veterans? And he said, yeah, let's do that. And he was very enthusiastic, and the station did this, and we were going to do maybe one or two a week leading up to the event we were going to have that year. And Dave, it's incredible to think it didn't stop there. It just kept going, and we had more and more veterans that would say, hey, I've got some things you'd like to hear. So now we've got 50-plus interviews that are archived there at the radio station, and they actually are available to be listened to on the website. And we have them in our museum now that people can go in there and listen to these interviews. And I'm really thankful that we've been able to do this because, sadly, many of our earliest interviews were World War II vets, and they're no longer with us, but we've got their stories, and people can still hear those stories. So it's just a blessing, and it's an incredible experience for a small town, and for us to be able to put something like this together, and it has been such a blessing to so many.
Well, and the interesting thing to me about the interview series has always been the fact that you can talk to three different guys that fought in the same war, fought for the same service, and were there at roughly the same time, and you get completely different stories from every one of them. Every story is unique.
Absolutely. These events that these men and women served in, these were trying times. These were difficult times, challenging times, and they all experienced them in different ways. Now, what we're hearing, probably the only similarity is these are people from almost every one of them are from South Mississippi, and they're coming from a perspective in many cases of being country folks and raised in the country or else in a small rural town, and their stories were from a different perspective for each of them, and I'm just overwhelmed. Every one of them, Dave, had a different story and a different perspective and a different experience.
Well, and that's why it's so important to get these stories and to save them. How did you how do you get these stories out of these veterans? What's your connection?
Well, I don't know. I never served in the military. I went to a military school, but I never served in the military. My dad was career Air Force, and I grew up around. I grew up on Air Force bases all around the country and overseas. And I guess I was with these veterans, especially those early years in the 50s and 60s when so many of the World War II vets were still involved in the military. And I don't know, I've always enjoyed the military history, reading about the lives of men, and then when we had the opportunity to do this program, it was so easy to do because I just encouraged them to share their hearts and their experiences, and bless them, they did.
Well, and the best part about it to me is something that you referred to just a minute ago, because some of the very early ones, and I've heard quite a few of them, were from World War II veterans, and a lot of those folks are no longer with us. But as you said, their story in their words, in their voice, is now preserved forever, and that's a huge thing.
Oh, it is. I think it is, especially for the future generations. I mean, you know, who knows? I know we have all of them archived at the radio station here in Brookhaven, and the museum has them on a computer there here in Brookhaven, and you know, it's just something that people, as somebody says in a history class, well, we're going to go to the Brookhaven Military Memorial Museum today and do a field trip, and we're going to listen to some of these guys. Well, they're going to be listening to the voices of men who may not still be with us, but their stories, and I'm telling you, Dave, you can hear the emotion in their voices in a lot of these interviews, and that's a poignant thing. It's really impressive.
Are you starting to have any difficulty finding veterans willing to come forward and tell their story, or are you still kind of having an easy time of it?
Well, no, it's not as easy as it was. Early on, we had a lot of the World War II veterans in our area. You know, they had a special camaraderie. They were close to one another, and they would encourage one another. And I had a good many World War II vets in the beginning. You know, and then I realized how important it was as I began to lose so many of those men that were my friends, and I realized it needed to be a point of emphasis for us on the program, and we did that, and then we realized Korea's veterans are starting to slip away, and now even the Vietnam guys are gray-headed, and so we've tried to continue to have opportunity, but you know. A lot of our veterans don't like to talk about themselves, but I tell them when they come in, it's not so much about yourself. I want you to share your experiences, but share your experiences about you and the men you served with, what you guys experienced together. So it's not an ego thing. It's sharing the experiences that they had in serving their country.
Well, and it's in a very real way, to me anyway, it's a public service for them to come forward and tell their stories and have them preserved for future generations. Because there's a difference between reading about it in a history book or in any other kind of book and actually hearing somebody who was there tell you in their own words what it was like. It's a completely different experience.
Oh, absolutely. And I was so fortunate. I've been so blessed to be able to sit across from these men as they told their stories. And I told them, every one of them, I said, okay, let's just forget about the microphone because it can be an intimidating thing, and don't listen or pay any attention to the guy behind the control panel. You just talk to me. Let's just sit in a coffee shop and talk about your experiences. And I think that relaxed many of them. And then as they talked, as we talked, they would be looking at me, and I could see in their eyes what an impact these events had in their lives. And I'm telling you, it's amazing how they could remember the date and even the time that some of these things took place 50 or 60 years earlier.
Yeah, meanwhile, I don't know what I had for lunch yesterday. Yeah. And these guys, but that's the difference in the impact of the events that they participated in.
That's right.
That to me is, again, another sign of why it's so important to get these stories recorded. Let me ask you this. We can throw it out there right now if you want to. Are you interested in any veterans that you haven't done this with, contacting you and sitting down for that conversation to record their experiences?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, Dave. I'll be glad to talk to anyone. Now, the last, since the first of the year and with all of this virus stuff, it's been a little bit of a challenge. And I haven't talked to anybody here in the last probably 6 months that was curious about or interested in possibly doing an interview. But I think that people need to know we can do this. I mean, the technology you guys have in the radio industry is amazing. Early on, when we had some Robert Bird was able to do things to help us get some interviews done with people that had difficulty getting here. So, yes, I would love to do more. They can continue to get in touch. Now, I'm a little bit harder to get to.
Well, I tell you what, Jack, we're up against a break. If you can hold on, give us just a second, and we'll get that contact information out there. And I have one or two other questions I want to ask you as well. Jack Rutland, we continue with him next, getting ready for Memorial Day here on the JT Show. Dave Hughes here on the guest line. Jack Rutland, host of True American Heroes. And we got cut off by the break. Jack, you were just explaining you're a very difficult guy to get a hold of.
Well, I don't know if it's difficult to get hold of, but I'm like many others. I'm working from my home, and that's out in the country, which doesn't get very good cell service. But I do have an office number that people can call, 601-835-5435. And if I don't answer, they can leave me a message, and I'll try to get back in touch. But it might be even easier just to get in touch with the SuperTalk Southwest station here in Brookhaven. And unfortunately, I do not have that phone number directly in front of me. But the station's listed in the book, and you can call and talk to any of the folks there, Heather or Robert or anyone there, and they'll be glad to get in touch with me, and then we'll set up a time when they can come in. All of this, of course, will be contingent upon how things go with the COVID. But yeah, I'm still looking for opportunities, and I would love to have some of the folks who were, involved in I've interviewed many from Desert Storm, but I'd love to have some who are back from Afghanistan and any of our Vietnam guys, anybody that served in a field of conflict, we'd be glad to do an interview. Any of our vets.
Well, and we have somebody on the C Spire text line. Dan from Columbus says, I know a Vietnam Huey combat pilot who might talk to him. He used to not talk about it, but he's opened up lately and will tell it like it was. So that might be a good
absolutely.
lead.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to have to defer to the radio station on the logistics of doing someone from other parts of the state. But look, I am so committed to this because these are men and women. We don't need to forget their stories. It's one thing to know, hey, yeah, Jack, your uncle was in World War II, wasn't he? And I could say yes, but then I could say yes, he flew in PBYs and he was a medic that rescued downed airmen and men off of ships that were sinking in the Pacific during the war. I mean, there's more than just, yes, he served. Yes, and let me tell you how he was used or what he was involved in. And that, to me, is so much more meaning than just saying, yeah, he wore the uniform. Yeah, he served and served in a significant way.
By the way, the number to the station in Brookhaven, SuperTalk Southwest 102.1, 601-835-5005. 601-835-5005. And when you call, ask for Heather because she's usually not doing anything anyway.
Oh,
I'm going to hear back on that one, Jack. I know I'm going to get some blowback on that. Before we let you go, let me ask you this. In all of these interviews, 50 some odd interviews that you've done and conversations you've had with veterans, is there one of those? Is there one story that just jumps out at you in your memory as the standout, as the one that just made the biggest impact on you?
Don't do that, Dave.
Yeah, I know. I put you right on the spot, didn't I? And they're all impactful. I'm not trying to say that some aren't. They are all impactful, and they're all important, and they're all just incredible stories. I was referring before we got you on to one of the clips that's running in one of the promos down there, talking about the guy that hitchhiked up to Jackson to sign up and said, "What time do I need to be back?" And they said, "What are you talking about?" He said,
not leaving.
Yeah, I was going home. He said, "No, 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. By then, you're going to be gone. Have a seat."
Well, there's so many stories, Dave. I'm not going to be able to give you one, but there were so many guys that did so many different things, And these interviews are 20 minutes on a 30-minute segment, a 30-minute show, but 20 minutes at least, and they shared so many stories. You know, the B-24 crewman who flew 32 missions over Europe during World War II and what he went through. The young soldier who was on the beach at Anzio, and a mortar went off and killed his two buddies that he was standing beside, and he didn't have a scratch. There was the gentleman who whole purpose, he said, the only thing that was utmost in my mind was bringing my whole squad home. And he said, I right toward the end of his tour in Korea, he lost one of his men, and he said, I've never gotten over that. And then there's the man that I actually go to church with that was given a direct order as they were retreating in Korea and told, come on, let's go. And he said, I've got a buddy who's wounded, and he was told, we don't have time to go get him. And he was ordered to leave, but he didn't. He went and got his buddy and carried him back to safety. I mean, there's so many stories, Dave, and all of them are so incredible that I'd love to be able to tell you 100 stories or the 50 stories, because all of them had something significant to tell, and to them it was a major part of their lives. It's things that they have never forgotten. I mean, I'll never forget the guy who served in Patton's Third Army, who went all the way across Europe, who was an infantry, just a grunt. He said, I went weeks without hot food. He said, I slept on the ground at night. I often, we would eat when we had time. There was the friend that I went to church with who was a Marine in the South Pacific, and he talked about landing at Guam and the hand-to-hand combat and how many of his closest friends didn't survive. And he said, I've never gotten over that. He said, I still remember their names. There's just so many stories that are just so significant, and I'd be hard pressed to give you one, but they're there in the archive for us to listen to and for people to listen to, and I just hope folks will take advantage of that.
Most definitely. And we've got several people that are texting in on the C Spire text line with suggestions of veterans that you would get a really good story out of to talk to. And I'm going to tell all of you folks that are texting in on the C Spire text line, it's impossible to do it in that direction. So we need you to reach out to Jack. He said the best way to do it is to call our station down in Brookhaven, SuperTalk Southwest 102.1 FM. You can reach them at 601-835-5005. That's 5005. And talk to them and let them know that you're interested in telling your story. And trust me, Jack's going to make it happen. You'll make it happen one way or another, because you have quite a few times, and they are just fascinating stories. I don't know if you remember this, but for one of them, you came down to the Macomb station, and I got to be the producer and run the equipment while you did one of those in the Macomb station, and that was just fascinating.
Well, that gentleman, Dave, if you remember, was talking about he was a machinist. Now, how important is a machinist in war? Well, when you think about it, that Patton's artillery was having trouble with one of their howitzers, and he was able to produce a part that made those howitzers work where they were having problems with them. From Macomb, Mississippi, what an incredible story for him to tell us.
Yes, and it wasn't a case where he was just making something that already existed. He designed this thing. He made this up from scratch.
Absolutely.
To solve a problem, like you said, from Mississippi, from Macomb, Mississippi. It was a fascinating story, but they all are. So again, reach out to Jack, 601-835-5005, the station number, and they will put you in touch with Jack because he would love to get your story on the record, because that's what this is all about, and it's an important thing to do as well as an interesting thing. And I want to thank you for taking the time over the years to put all this together and do this and work it into your busy schedule that you already have, because it is important, and it becomes more important with each year that goes by. I think that we have these permanent records. So thank you for the time that you've spent doing this.
It's an honor beyond description, and the memorial plaque or the monument that's in front of the courthouse in Brookhaven has 97 names on it, Dave, of men who did not come back from conflict that our country were involved in. And we must never forget them. And that's, as we come to Memorial Day, my thing has always been, we will never forget their service to their country.
And that's the entire point. True American heroes. You can hear it on 102.1 FM every week down in Brookhaven. Jack, we appreciate your time this morning talking to us about this. Keep up the good work, and hopefully we are going to have some response for you there. We got several people talking, asking on the C Spire text line, just very quickly because we're out of time here, if the programs are available online, because a lot of people would like to listen to this.
Well, my understanding is it is on the Southwest SuperTalk website. I've never listened to them there, so I have to defer to that, Dave.
Fantastic. Jack Rutland, we appreciate your time and keep on doing the good work.
Thank you, Dave. God bless you guys.